I have way too much highlight on my nose right now, and I feel like you could see it from space. It's not the look I was going for. Hey everyone, it's Amy, and welcome back to my apartment floor, which has become my new filming area in my new apartment. It's not exactly a very aesthetically pleasing background, and it's not exactly the kindest lighting in the world either, but it's what we've got to work with. It is what it is. So I decided that I would do a story time video for you guys because this is something that just like came to mind recently, something that happened to me like quite a few years ago, but it just randomly popped into my head the other day and I was like, that would probably make a pretty good story time. As you can tell from the title of this video, it's a bit of a dramatic story. I got pneumonia when I was in South Africa. I don't do my vacations by halves, okay? This has become one of my favorite stories to tell people just because it's so ridiculous and so dramatic and just reflects how needlessly bizarre my life really is and how just strange things happen to me, and I seem to be the person who always gets into like just ridiculous situations. And you know, now I can laugh about it, and like I said, I like to tell this story, but at the time it was really scary. Like there was one night where I genuinely thought I was going to die. It was really bad. So the first time I went to South Africa was in 2010 and I was 17 at the time. I'd heard about this like charity project where they get predominantly young people to go out to South Africa and like build houses and schools and like creches and like do good stuff, you know? And it was the best experience. It was so great. It was so intense. Like we would get up at the crack of dawn and we would be working all day, and it was so labor intensive. Like we didn't have any tools. Like we had no electricity, we had no tools. Like we were mixing cement with a broken broom handle because we didn't have like a cement mixer or anything. Everything had to be done by hand, and for someone who had never really done any physical activity ever, for someone like me, that was a really A, exhausting, but B, really rewarding experience, and I loved it and I couldn't wait to get back the next year. Fast forward to 2011, and when it was time to sign up to go back to South Africa, I was like, hey, put me down, first name on the list. And my mother decided that she really wanted to go because I'd spent the last year raving about it, and she went with her friend as well. It was not the same the second time round at all. It was so different for so many different reasons, and it was not a good time. So, okay, picture like this. There's this field and they have like a church at one end, and the first time I went there was pretty much just this one church and like this little building at the back of the field, and that was pretty much it. And everything they were building was being built on that field. So you would live and work all in this one space. The first year we lived in the church, which had no electricity and a leaky roof and bugs and birds nesting in the rafters, and it was hard going, but it was okay, you know, it was manageable. The second time when we went back, there were just too many people for the amount of space, so they ended up putting a bunch of like the girls who were there into a shipping container. It's also worth noting that the second time we went, because we always went over like the Easter half term for school, it was later that year. So it was like further into the South African winter, and it was really freaking cold. People don't believe me when I say that it was really cold in South Africa. They're like, Africa, that's hot, like what are you talking about? But it gets cold in South Africa, and it particularly gets cold if you are living in a big tin block, and it gets really damp. And whereas the first time it had been grimy living conditions, the second time it was just like pretty unbearable, because when you're going to bed freezing cold every night and you're shivering in your sleeping bag, it's just awful. So I was there for like about 10 or 11 days altogether, and the second night I woke up, and you know when your throat is just so painful that you can't even swallow. It's just, you can feel that it's all swollen on the inside. I had that and I woke up and I was just like, oh, this is not what I need right now. You know, like I live in a shipping container. I gotta get up and like shovel concrete tomorrow. I don't need to have a sore throat on top of everything. By, I think it was the 4th day, I was feeling really ill. I was starting to be like physically sick. I was sat, this is not a good memory to recall, I was sat in this like restaurant kind of thing in a shopping centre. So it was open plan, like a food court. And we'd ordered food and drinks. And I was sat at the table after I'd eaten my food and I was like, I don't feel good. And my friend Ellie was like, you okay? You're gonna be sick? And I was like, I think I'm gonna be sick. With all the will in the world, if you gotta be sick, you gotta be sick. And I just was panicking and just picked up her glass that was next to me that was empty on the table and was just sick into the glass. And the waiter was all like, he had to carry it away and I was just like, sorry. By this point, probably 50% of the people who were there, like in the little camp, were ill, and a lot of people were coming down with tonsillitis. What they were doing was like checking to see if people had spots on their throat, then they were taking them to the hospital to get antibiotics because they knew they had tonsillitis. And if you didn't have spots on your throat, then they were like, you just got a cough, like, you'll get over it. But as time went on, I was just feeling worse and worse, and it got to the point where I couldn't even get out of bed. So I was in bed all the time, or I would maybe like get out of bed, try and do a little bit of work, and then one day I fell asleep with my head like on a table, just like out in the open in this field. I just fell asleep and I was like out for count. Still, nobody believed me that I was ill because I didn't have tonsillitis. So on the very last night, we ended up going out somewhere. I'm trying to remember where we went. It was probably for food, but I just remember like coughing, and my chest was getting tighter and tighter, and I was hot, and I just felt horrendous. Like, I've never felt like this in my life, and I hope that I never feel this way again. I genuinely thought that I was gonna die that night. And that sounds so melodramatic. Like, it hurt to breathe. Every time I breathed in, it was like burning, and it felt like I couldn't get any air in my lungs. And I went back and I was like, please, can someone take me to the hospital? And they said no. And I went back again and I was like, please, can someone take me to the hospital? And they said no. And when we got back to the camp, I was like, well then can someone please get me the number of a taxi, because I'm going to the hospital whether someone takes me or not. At which point, I think they gathered that I actually really needed to go to the hospital if I was willing to like drag my own butt there. So the guy who was kind of organizing this whole charity project, in the end he was like, fine, I'll take you to the hospital. And I really don't think he wanted to. I think he thought that I was just being a drama queen about it. There are like no rules of the road in South Africa. You can just be in the back of a pickup truck and like it's cool, it's casual. So we got in the back of this pickup truck driving to the hospital. I'm still like, I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die before we even make it there. My mom will be sorry that she told me to take another Lemsip because I'll be dead. By the way, private healthcare in South Africa is like 10 out of 10. I got in, saw the nurse, saw the doctor, got my x-ray, and then went back to the doctor to be like diagnosed and get a prescription, all within the space of about 45 minutes. So when I went back down for my diagnosis, the doctor told me, you know, you have pneumonia, I'm gonna get you some antibiotics. It wasn't at the point where I needed to be kept in the hospital, and I told him that I was flying home the next day, and he said, it's okay, it's not like really bad. So if you just take your antibiotics, you'll be okay. So the doctor writes me up my prescription. I get back into the back of this pickup truck and I'm being driven around South Africa at this point. It's the middle of the night, like it's dark, and trying to find a pharmacy that's open so we can get my antibiotics. I'm just like passed out in the back of this pickup truck. At this point, I was completely unconscious in my friend's lap. Eventually, the guy who's in charge, he gets out, takes my prescription, gets me my antibiotics, brings them back. We head back to the camp where I get out and my mother's like, you've been gone for so many hours, are you okay? And I'm like, no woman, I got pneumonia and you told me to take another Lemsip. She felt really bad about it. She still feels really bad about it to this day, but I'm like, hey, let's just look back and laugh. Nobody died at the end of the day. So there's that story. I feel like I've been talking forever. I feel like that was the longest story I've ever told. but hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy this video, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up to let me know. Go ahead, click that subscribe button to become a member of our Oddball family. Thank you to everyone who is already subscribed. You are my oddballs and I love you. But until next time, I hope you all have a beautiful day. Thank you guys so much for watching and I will see you all soon. Bye.